If you Google how much do I need to retire, you're probably going to get a variety of different answers, most of them from leading financial institutions like Charles Schwab, Vanguard, or even Fidelity, who says that you need about 10 times your annual salary saved by age 67 in order to comfortably retire. While this might be a decent starting point if you have no idea how much you're going to need saved for retirement, in this video I'm going to point out a few flaws in this rule of thumb and why you might not even need as much as Fidelity would lead you to believe. Hey everyone, if we haven't met yet, my name is Jake Skellhorn. I'm a certified financial planner and the co-owner of Spark Wealth Advisors, which is a wealth management firm located here in Florida. My partner Chris and I help people across the country retire with confidence and clarity. So first things first, let's take a quick look at the Fidelity article in question and go over the assumptions that they make for their sort of rule of thumb. As you can see, it's titled, How Much Do I Need to Retire? I'll include a link in the description below, but it should be pretty easy to find on Google if you just type that in. The main takeaway here, again, is that they recommend you have 10 times your income saved by age 67. So if you earn $100,000 a year, by the time you're age 67, you should have about $1 million saved, according to Fidelity. A couple other assumptions here. They assume that you're saving at least 15% or exactly 15% of your annual income starting at age 25. This does include an employer match to your 401k or 403b. So if you're saving 10% and your employer matches you 15%, that is kind of what their assumption is there. They do assume that you're investing at least 50% of your portfolio in stocks over your lifetime. So not too aggressive, not too conservative. I think that's a fair assumption. Again, they're assuming that you retire at 67. That's one of the issues I have with this article. A lot of people want to retire earlier than that, and they don't really have any sort of guidance as to how much you should have saved if you want to retire earlier, but we'll go into that more later. Again, they also provide sort of milestones as far as what you should have saved at different ages. So it's not just 10 times your salary at age 67, but 1 times your salary at 30, 4 times by 45, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple other quick assumptions that they make. They assume that you're going to live until age 93, so your retirement savings will last from 67 to 93. And they assume that you want to replace about 45% of your pre-tax income. So again, if you're earning $100,000 by the time you're approaching retirement, they are assuming that you will need about $45,000 per year to cover your expenses. So with those assumptions out of the way, let's go into a few reasons why I think Fidelity's approach is a little too vague and you shouldn't rely on it too heavily for retirement planning. Number one, I mentioned a moment ago, it's that they assume you're going to retire at 67. In my own experience and the people that I work with at my firm, most people want to retire before that these days. I do work with a few clients who want to continue working to age 70 or so just because they enjoy their work and it gives them fulfillment. But most people that I talk to, pre-retirement in their 40s or 50s, they want to aim to retire at about age 60 or so. So with that, you need to have a more personalized plan because if you're retiring at 60, you have more years that you need that nest egg to cover your expenses for. So again, Fidelity's sort of rule of thumb here doesn't really account for retiring early. It just says this is what you should have if you plan to retire at 67. The other thing I don't really like and I think is too vague about Fidelity's article is that they just use an income multiplier when in reality you don't need to replace your income in retirement. You just need to replace enough to cover your expenses. So what I mean by this is one person earning $100,000 might be saving 20% of their income or 10%, while another person may be saving 50% of their income. So by aiming to save a multiple of your income might be a little misleading as to how much you actually need to cover your expenses in retirement. So the other thing here with Fidelity's article is that it's not personalized. Again, that's kind of the common theme here. It is a vague sort of rule that they use. And in their defense, they do include a couple caveats by saying how much you need to retire really depends on when you want to retire and what type of lifestyle you want to live. In other words, spend the same as you did before retirement or more or less. But the lack of personalization, I think, is a big one here because they also don't consider other income sources that you might have, such as Social Security, pensions, which are more rare these days, but rental income, things like that. So let's just use a quick example. If you, again, are earning $100,000 per year at 67, Fidelity says you need $1 million saved, and you can safely withdraw about $45,000 per year to cover your expenses. So it sounds like they're using the 4% rule or 4.5% rule in this case, which is fine. Again, another rule of thumb, it'll get you close, but not exactly personalized to your situation. So by including Social Security, most people working today will receive Social Security. The average benefit is just under $2,000 per month. So if your expenses, again, are $45,000 and you're receiving $24,000 from Social Security, well, then you really only need about $20,000 from your portfolio, not 45. So in that situation, if you're receiving Social Security, then you really only need closer to $500,000 saved rather than a million. So again, by relying on a rule of thumb like this, you might be misled into thinking that you need to save $1 million in this example when you really only probably need about $500,000, $600,000 or so. And while Fidelity's approach does tell you how much you should probably have saved by the time you retire, it doesn't really spell out how much you can safely withdraw from your portfolio each year and what happens if adjustments need to be made based on how the markets are doing, etc. So my response to this as a certified financial planner is using what's called retirement income guardrails. And what that does is it sets rules for when you can increase or decrease your spending based on how the markets are doing, so you don't run out of money and you also don't underspend in retirement, which is of course important as well. So just to show you a very quick example of guardrails in action, here we have a hypothetical client, Jane. She's 67 years old. She has that $1 million portfolio we've been mentioning throughout the video. She earns about $2,000 a month in Social Security, as we mentioned, is pretty much the average for. So based on Jane's Social Security income and her portfolio balance, she can safely spend about $7,113 per month in retirement. And this is the number that I find most people really care about. But not only that, having a plan for when adjustments need to be made really sort of helps ease the nerves of what's going to happen when the market drops, because it inevitably will drop in retirement at some point. But here we can see that the upper guardrail, which is that sort of point where we can increase her income, is about 1.1 million. She can increase her withdrawals to about $8,000 per month. But if the market drops, which is a pretty significant drop here, if it drops about 25%, she'll have to cut back on spending a little bit, not too much. It's usually about 5% in order to preserve her portfolio while the market bounces back. So again, this is sort of what I mean by guardrails. If you want to check out a more detailed video of this approach and why I like it better than the 4% rule, you can check that out after this video, and I'll leave a link in the description below. So the point I wanted to get across with this video is that Fidelity's rule of thumb might be a good starting point if you have no idea what you're going to need saved for retirement. At the end of the day, I think a personalized plan is going to be much more effective for a lot of people. Again, if you want to retire before 67, if you have other income sources in retirement, all of those are big factors that can play into when you can actually retire and how much you're going to need saved. So if you want to check out a more detailed video on retirement income guardrails that we discussed there at the end, you can watch this video now where I kind of compare it to the 4% rule and why I think it's a better strategy for most people. Besides that, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and share it with a friend. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for joining.